We can't just stand around here.
Right.
Whoa! Guess who?
Sonic the Hedgehog. It's a name that literally anyone watching this video is familiar with, unless you somehow live under a rock or something. There isn't a single gamer that doesn't know who this blue guy is, and for good reason. Sonic was one of the original icons in the video game industry, making his debut on the freshly released Sega Genesis as a launch title.
That's what I'm talking about! That's why he's the MVP! That's why he's the GOAT! The GOAT!
Sonic focused on doing something different from his Italian plumber counterpart at old Nintendo, and different he did. The main goal of virtually every single Sonic game in existence is to be fast. This hedgehog loves to run, and he single-handedly changed platforming forever. While Mario was fast in his own right, Sonic was the first major video game franchise to focus so heavily on constant movement and going as fast as possible. And Sega stuck to that formula for the most part. Back in the 90s, this guy and Mario were mortal enemies as far as fans were concerned. Sonic was the character that defined Sega, and he still is their primary mascot even to this very day. There is a boatload of Sonic content out there. Some fantastic, some okay, some mediocre, and some so abysmally bad to the point where Sonic sort of became a meme status for a little while for poor quality game design. Despite all of that, June is Sonic Month, a little celebration of the franchise coined by a friend of the channel, Shin0555, who is doing it for years. Well, guess what? We're doing it over here now too. So for all of June, we're going to be talking about the world's fastest hedgehog. But that's not all we're doing, for the theme for this year's Sonic Month is Sonic memes, which can be interpreted in many ways. And I'll be interpreting it as low-quality Sonic games. For those who are millennials such as myself watching, you'll probably remember Sonic's entire history well. For the younger audience watching, some of you might be unaware that Sonic's transition to 3D was a sloppy one at best. Unlike Mario, Zelda, and Star Fox, another major franchise at their start in the 16-bit era, Sonic didn't really get a conventional Sonic game for the 5th generation consoles. Instead, there was a lot of experimentation until he got his most notable 3D outing in Sonic Adventure for the Dreamcast, followed by its legendary sequel, Sonic Adventure 2. These two games really set the standard high for the franchise, but there was trouble a-brewin' just around the corner. Sonic had a very awkward transition to 3D in this time period thanks to the failure of the Sega Dreamcast, a console that was beloved by many but failed due to a myriad of reasons, despite being a pretty decent console in terms of quality. But that's topic for another video when I have Malum here, I suppose. The point is that this meant Sega was forced to make peace with their former opponents in the console market and switch to being a software-focused company instead of a hardware-focused one. The Dreamcast would be the final main console that Sega would release. Sonic would find its first new entry that went multi-plat in Sonic Heroes, a game that had troubled development due to the team struggling to learn how to develop for platforms they'd never worked on before, all trying to push out 3 versions of the game. Sonic Heroes was met with mediocre reception and remains a mixed bag among fans. But it began a period for Sonic that many dub the Dark Ages. Sonic, a series once known for solid entries, became marred with several missteps, trying to do something different every time and attempting every single spin-off under the sun with mixed results. It wouldn't be until around maybe the 2010s where the franchise mostly got back on track with only a handful of blunders, mostly being kept strong by the superb handheld entries. And while it would be great to talk about some of those, as Sonic Battle is one of my favorite Sonic spin-off games, we're instead going to be talking about a game that came out near the end of the supposed Dark Ages, and that game is Sonic Riders Zero Gravity. This game was a strange situation as it was a sequel to Sonic Riders, a game that was met with fairly mixed reception. So it's already strange to make a sequel to a game that wasn't even that loved. But the first game was a commercial success regardless, so I guess it's all about chasing that big dollar bill.
We've got to have money.
Zero Gravity wouldn't change a drastic amount from predecessor, minus swapping the air system for the gravity system, where you can alter gravity in the game as the title suggests. A third entry was made for the Xbox Kinect, and as you can imagine, that one was more panned than this one. Literally a trilogy of Sonic games that I'm surprised even got 3 entries, given that they didn't exactly have a strong foundation. However, it's worth noting that Sonic Riders would be one of the building blocks for Sonic Cross Worlds, a beloved Sonic racing game. So in celebration of Sonic Month, we're going to start things off by taking a dive on one of the more controversial entries into the franchise, and see if this game really was as mediocre as people say, or was some hidden gem that just came out at a bad time to an audience that was already annoyed by Sonic 06.
You don't want to be like this. This is disgusting. This is awful in every way. If I could kill it, I would. But I legally can't. But I've considered it.
and ready to tear Sonic Team a new one for any game that wasn't Sonic Adventure 3. Sonic Adventure 3 is never going to happen, by the way, just like Chrono Trigger 2 will never happen. Rather than think about what could have been, though, let's focus on what is and dig right into this bad boy.
Now the main problem area is up here. All of this going on up here is what's causing me the most physical discomfort. It's like a visceral reaction of discontent coming from this area. This area is not good either. I hate this, but I'm mainly worried about this.
So this game came out on the Nintendo Wii and PlayStation 2 back in 2008. Yes, you heard that right, 2008, meaning the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 were already 2 years old by then. Apparently a 7th gen port of this game was planned, but it never materialized. Unless you want to count the Wii as a true 7th gen console, which is on a technicality level I suppose, but not on a hardware level, as those who are familiar with it know that the Wii was literally just an overclocked GameCube. Despite being made for last gen and the version I'm playing on this video being the PlayStation 2 version, which if you know anything about the PS2, it was on a tech level weaker than the GameCube and therefore weaker than the Wii, I have to say the graphics in this game look excellent for a PS2 game. Graphically it's stunning and gorgeous and it runs very smoothly.
You look stunning.
You're looking at it with the Vulkan enhancements, as obviously I'm running this on the Odin 2, but I did try it on actual hardware and it looks just as good. The cutscenes in the game look impressive and the controls feel fairly tight. Honestly, this at first glance looks like a pretty polished Sonic game. So why was it met with such mixed opinions? Well, there's a number of reasons for that, but let's get to the positives first. Graphically, as I've already said, this game is a major improvement over its predecessor, which was criticized often for its blocky geometry and poor textures. That's all gone, and the game looks a lot cleaner, a lot more refined, and that's great. Levels look and feel diverse, and they play differently enough from each other. Controls feel alright, but they can be a bit frustrating from time to time. It's far from the worst racing controls I've ever played, but it could be slightly better. I'd call it maybe a B- or so in that area. Having to hold forward to accelerate is a confusing choice, and it makes performing those sharper turns a bit trickier, making its zero gravity mechanic a must to master. That's the biggest hurdle when playing this game, is there's a lot to learn when it comes to being competent at racing, and the game features a multi-part tutorial, which, while helpful, does kind of hurt the ability to pass your friend a second controller for the two of you to jump and enjoy a fair race together without him going through a little boot camp to actually master the controls. Part of what makes racing games fun is the ability to invite a friend over who's never played them and join in, and the controls just feel intuitive enough to make it make sense your first time playing. Therefore being able to just jump in and go at it. Sonic Riders Zero Gravity definitely requires every player to play the tutorials first before they are ready for a match against friends, that's for sure. The pickup and playability just isn't there, but that doesn't mean the game is bad. But you know how it goes, the moment you have to tell your friend to play through 10 minutes of tutorials, he's just going to suggest playing a different game. There's a good amount of playable characters here, and ones from all over the franchising, including the GOAT herself, Blaze the Cat. So how does this game play? Well, if you're familiar with snowboarding games, it's very similar, but the catch is you're on hoverboards. The biggest feature is the zero gravity feature, which is insanely weird to master, but once you get a feel for it, it is actually pretty damn cool. Every character has a different board, and their boards all have different abilities, and they all handle differently. Oh, and Knuckles sucks, by the way. He is way too slow, and his ability to turn corners make him on any level where you have to play as him an ungodly nightmare. Just thought I'd point that out. This means you'll have to pay attention on tracks to look for signs that indicate the abilities that your board has for you to take advantage of them. The biggest complaint I have with this game is the difficulty. The NPCs are just the most immaculate racers ever, and sometimes even a single error makes it impossible to recoup your losses. This game is pretty damn hard, so you'll need to play it many times to truly master it. It's probably a lot better if you want to play with just you and your friends, but you will need a PS2 controller expansion to even play with 4 people. Unless you have the Wii version, obviously. Oh, and there's no online multiplayer either, which sucks because playing with real people makes racing games more genuine. I feel as though NPCs don't really get tripped up ever except a handful of zero gravity turns. Not that the online would still be active to this day anyway. There's enough variety to keep you entertained though, and the more you play it, the better it becomes. But you really have to stick it out if you want to maximize your enjoyment. I really do wish there was a better diversity of power-ups though. Power-ups work pretty simple. You grab rings on the course and use them to level up your board through 3 levels called gear changes. Once you're at max level, that's about it. You've unlocked all you can for that race, and any item boxes you run over will just refill your gravity gauge or occasionally sabotage you. It ain't no Mario Kart. There's no items to grab and throw your enemies off. You have to win by pure skill, not booby traps. Due to the high difficulty though, you better bring your A game, because you'll need it if you want to take home the gold. Oh, and this is one of those games required to finish the story mode to unlock most of the content, including the stuff you'd want to use in multiplayer, which I don't think I need to explain why that's a bad decision, given how brutal the difficulty is at times. Aside from that though, we need to talk about the music, because Sonic games always have excellent music it seems, and this one is no exception, as it's home to two of my favorite Sonic tracks ever. Sonic always brings the beats, and I can't complain about that. Even some of the worst Sonic games bring home some excellent beats. I think it goes without saying that Sonic is not a franchise known for its incredible storytelling or believable narrative.
It all comes down to this one penalty kick. Can the young woman break the glass ceiling and prove once and for all that a female can be just as good an athlete as a male?
You know, Amy, anytime someone calls attention to the breaking of gender rules, it ultimately undermines the concept of gender equality by implying that this is an exception and not the status quo. What? Just because I'm a meathead doesn't mean I'm not a feminist.
Most of the stories in the games are just there to solely justify a game. I mean, come on, it's a talking blue hedgehog, so I don't think anybody was expecting gripping storytelling across the board. That's not to say that Sonic can't have deep storytelling, as once again to bring up Sonic Battle, which has pretty great moments in it, but not every Sonic game focuses on making deep layered narrative, and Sonic Riders Zero Gravity is one of those games, and that's not a bad thing. Story doesn't always have to be the star of the show, that's for sure. The game is split up into two main campaigns for the story, which you'll need to complete both if you want to unlock all the content. You have the hero story and the Babylon story. That unlocks after you finish the hero story. The story begins with Sonic, Knuckles, and Tails uncovering a mysterious ring that fell to the planet from a meteorite. They uncover the ring that was one of 5 called the Arks of the Cosmos, originating from an ancient tribe called the Babylonians. During the course of the game, the Babylon Rogues are trying to acquire the Arks of the Cosmos to fulfill an ancient prophecy bestowed upon them from their ancestors. They also have a score to settle with Sonic and friends from the previous game. Their leader Jet is the team's equivalent to Sonic, and he is, well, his design is okay, but his personality is, he's an idiot.
This stone's magnetic field is able to transmute a planet's mass energy and create a singularity to...
Can the boring speech. What can this thing do for me?
It's like they combined Sonic and Knuckles in the worst possible way, and I can see why people don't like these guys so much. Especially because the big gray guy in their team is also an idiot, named Storm. The only competent one in their team is Wave, who serves as their team's mechanic and is kind of their equivalent to Tails, and she's pretty much the brains of the operation. Or rather, the only brains of the operation. The stories intertwine with each other, telling the story of how Dr. Eggman once again hoped to build Eggman Land by abusing the power of the Arks of the Cosmos. Which, seriously, this guy just does not give up. But his plan backfired when he put them in the central computer of his headquarters and started making the robots all go haywire. Once Eggman is dealt with, the two team up as they discover the ancient Babylonians purposely disconnected the Ark of the Cosmos from their ancient alien spaceship to stop the ship from destroying itself. You're treated to a final boss that takes a crazy amount of practice to beat, but once he's taken care of, the ship is destroyed, the day is saved, and we're treated to a graphically pretty final cutscene with Sonic and friends.
I bet they'd wish they could get back to their home planet.
Maybe that's why people started wishing on shooting stars. Sonic!
The story is not that long. In fact, if you know what you're doing, you can finish it up in maybe 2 to 3 hours. So most of your time will be spent practicing to get good enough to even finish the game, because the expectations for you to win are insanely high. Every single course expects you to come in first with very, very little wiggle room. Most of the time, attack tracks will give you barely enough time to pull it off. It isn't uncommon to see a timer have only 2 seconds remaining when you cross that finish line. The story is far from deep, and it definitely didn't do much to make people like the Babylon Rogues, but it's simple and forgivable. And again, if you're playing Sonic for the story, you should remind yourself that Sonic 06 was a thing with its absurd story about time travel and a hedgehog showing romantic feelings to a human princess. I don't think anybody was expecting to be Chrono Trigger, that's for sure. Still, the story isn't bad. I'd give it somewhere about a 7 out of 10, maybe. Maybe if they fleshed it out and gave Jet more dialogue that doesn't sound like he's a total moron, I'd give it a higher score.
Crush? Ha! I'm the fastest thing in the universe, and today, I'm gonna prove it!
But if you're a Sonic fan like I am, though, you can look past its flawed story and find an enjoyable game underneath. But as I've mentioned many times, expect to get a little practice in because Sonic Riders Zero Gravity is not trying to be Mario Kart. The pickup and playability is not nearly as strong here. You'll need to be honing those skills if you want to stand a chance at finishing it. This is where we have plenty to talk about. On top of mastering the game's controls and gameplay, you have a myriad of unlockable content to keep you entertained for hours after the story is complete. There is a metric boatload of content to sink your teeth into, but since we don't have an infinite amount of time, I'm just going to cover the important bits. On top of unlocking tracks as you progress through the story and different characters, there's also different game modes to play, such as Grand Prix, which is your traditional racing mode that most games like this have. You also have Time Attack, of course, special missions for the story levels, and a shop with different boards that you can buy and use. So you have hours of additional content on top of the story mode, so there's plenty of entertainment here. Especially if you have some friends to play with, because like I keep saying, the difficulty is pretty unforgiving. The game expects you to make a very few mistakes if you want to come on top, but if you can get some friends to play, it's actually a really great experience. The zero gravity aspect of the game will definitely throw you off at first, because the controls for the airtime are inverted, which isn't inherently the problem, but you have to hold down forward to accelerate, so you have to know that the moment you take to the air, you have to quickly switch to pressing back on the joystick, otherwise you'll go right back to the ground. Once you master it though, the zero gravity aspects of the game can be pretty fun and entertaining, but definitely tricky to land at some of the places that are an option for you to grind on, that's for sure. With different gear, you have to pay attention to what abilities that your board has though, because there isn't a way to check during race. But you can spend your hard-earned rings on goodies to improve the racing experience. Honestly, I generally felt like I was getting a pretty good package this one, and as far as the spin-off Sonic title goes, I generally did feel like this was one of the better ones that wasn't slopped together. The gameplay definitely could use some work, that's for sure, but you get a decent amount for your money, albeit you're not getting Mario Kart levels of content out of it. Super Mario Kart is still my favorite, by the way. No, I will not be elaborating on that. Also, you can play as Blaze, so that makes this game infinitely better. I'm not sure if Sonic Riders Zero Gravity will make you a fan of this spin-off series, especially after the dreadfully bad Xbox Kinect game, which we try not to talk about. Hell, I'm not even sure this will make you a fan of Sonic in general if you aren't already. But Sonic Riders Zero Gravity is definitely not as bad as everyone acted like it was. It was, and remains, fairly rough around the edges, yes. And yes, the Babylon Rogues are, well, they're definitely not the best edition of the Sonic universe. But let's not pretend that we haven't had some terrible additions to the Sonic universe, though. I could easily make an entire video just talking about the bad Sonic entries. If you can get past its rough exterior, and convince a friend or two to take the time to learn from the tutorial, this game is actually super fun to play with a few friends for a round or two. It has a lot of good ideas that just didn't land as well as the developers had hoped, but it's still a fairly solid game. I wouldn't say it stands one of the greatest Sonic entries, but it's far from Eternal Sonata levels of bad. Sonic Riders Zero Gravity stands well above its predecessor, but probably not at the top of the pyramid of great Sonic content. I would still recommend giving it a try and checking it out. If you're a Sonic fan and you want more Sonic content and you've never tried this game, it's definitely one that might be worthy of your time. Again, as long as you go into it with a tempered attitude. Either way, happy Sonic Month, everybody. Look forward to more Sonic content all June. And also be sure to check out Shin0555 for more Sonic Month content. Be sure to check out our Discord server, which I have a link in the description for it. If you're new to the channel, I do retrospectives on retro or retro-inspired games like this one, so subscribe if you want to see more of that. And make sure to hit the notification bell so you stay informed of my newest videos. I'm WizPlay, and that's enough of that.